In this series of videos, we'll cover how to add haptic feedback and vibration to your Unity mobile game using the Hapthicks asset available from the Asset Store via the link in the description. In this video specifically, I'll walk you through how to use the Hapthick Editor to create new Hapthicks, save and load them, and explore some of the basic features that help you bring your ideas to life. Then we'll see how to generate haptics from audio clips, and I'll also show you how to create a QR code so you can scan it in the companion app and feel your custom haptics on your device. Finally, we'll wrap things up by learning how to export and import haptics as .ahap files. Let's bring up the Hapthick Editor from the Tools menu. Here we've got the Documentation button and the Tutorial Videos button. Also, I highly recommend downloading the free Hapthicks companion app for iOS or Android. It lets you try your Hapthicks quickly and easily right on your device. Okay, let's start by opening a sample Haptic file. Click on Open Existing Haptic. Now let's go to the Hapthicks folder, then Sample Haptics, and select, let's go with Smooth Rise. Great! You can see the Smooth Rise Hapthick is loaded. Now let me show you another way to load a Haptic file. I'll just resize this window first. Alright, now let's go to the Sample Haptics folder again, and this time double-click on 3-tap. Nice! You see that? It says Editing 3-tap, which means the 3-tap Haptic file is now loaded. Now let's be brave and create a Haptic from scratch, shall we? Let's go back to the main menu of the Hapthick Editor by clicking Back to Menu. Now click on Create New Haptic and choose where to save it. Let's go into the Haptics folder, then Sample Haptics, and name it My Haptic. And there it is. Our new Haptic file has been created. Now let me show you what we can do with the Hapthick Editor. First, we have duration. This controls how long your Haptic will last. You can set it to any number, like 2 seconds or 4 seconds. Next, we've got the intensity curve. This is where you define how strong the Haptic feels at each point in time. For example, let's move the first point at second 0 to intensity 0, which means you'll feel nothing at the beginning. Then let's set the last point at the end to intensity 1, which is full intensity. Now when you play this Haptic, you'll feel a smooth ramp-up vibration in your hand. Let's try something else. We'll move that last point back down to intensity 0. Then let's double-click near second 2 to add a new point. I'll set this new point to intensity 1. Now we've got a nice curve. When it plays, you'll feel nothing at first. Then it rises to a strong vibration and finally fades out again. You can double-click anywhere along the curve to add as many points as you need. It's all about creating exactly what's in your mind. To delete a point, just select it and press the delete key on your keyboard. And it's gone. Okay, let me tell you about sharpness. Sharpness is how sharp your Haptic should be. It's only for iOS and will be totally ignored on Android devices. You have 2 ways to set up your sharpness. Constant, which means throughout the entire duration of your Haptic, you feel the same constant sharpness. You can use this slider to change your constant sharpness value. And another option is curve, which is similar to intensity. You can assign different values to different points of your Haptic for sharpness. Let's open it up and take a look. We can play with the value of these points, but we cannot double-click to add any more points or press the delete key to remove any. All points in the sharpness curve must exactly match the points in the intensity curve in terms of timing and count. Okay, the next option I want to explain to you is this checkbox, Force Smooth on iOS. When we enable this, our iOS version will use only continuous AHAPs and won't use any transient AHAPs. In simpler words, when you disable this checkbox and your iOS version uses both continuous and transient, it will detect the points that are drastically different from the previous points. For example, if your first point is intensity 0 and the next is intensity 1, you won't feel a smooth rise, even if the time gap is large. But when you enable this checkbox, you will feel a smooth rise from each point to the next one. On Android devices, you always feel smooth by default. So to make the experience consistent across both platforms, I suggest keeping this checkbox enabled. Next one is no amplitude threshold, and this one is only for Android devices, and not even all of them. It's for Android devices that do not support amplitude control. Let me explain. Amplitude control means you can tell your vibration hardware how much intensity you want. But when a device doesn't support amplitude control, you can only tell the vibration motor to turn on or off. On all iOS devices, amplitude control is supported, which is great. But on some Android devices, like economy models or older ones, it isn't. This slider is exactly for those devices. With it, you define, if your intensity goes higher than the threshold value, the vibration motor turns on. Otherwise, it stays off. So for example, if we set it to 0.5, then any intensity above 0.5 will be felt on those devices. For example, let me move my intensity value at this point to 0.4. And now, you won't feel anything on non-amplitude Android devices because our threshold is 0.5 and 0.4 is lower than that. But if I set it to 0.3, you will feel that intensity because it's now above the threshold. Let's go for the audio section. In this first field, we can select an audio clip. Let me select this sample sound. Now first, let me click on Generate Audio Waveform. This generates a waveform background for our curves. It doesn't affect the Hapthick itself. It just helps you align your curves to your audio if you want to. Now let me show you what waveform detail is. When we increase it and click the Generate Waveform button again. As you can see, we get more detail in the waveform background. Now let me decrease the value and click the Generate button again. Now you can see there's less detail in the waveform background. Let me reset it to 0.5 and we can go to the next option. Next option is this Show Audio Waveform checkbox. We can toggle the visibility of the waveform background on or off using this. Here we have an advanced settings section for the audio waveform. When we expand it, it shows min point count and max point count. Min point count is the minimum number of amplitude samples to extract from the audio clip, regardless of clip length or detail setting. This ensures the waveform isn't too sparse for short audio. Max point count is the maximum number of samples allowed for long audio clips to cap performance overhead. Now let's jump into the curve generation section. This allows us to auto-generate our curves from the selected audio. First option is curve resolution. Using this slider, we set how much detail is extracted from the audio. In other words, the higher you set it, the more points you'll get in your intensity curve, which results in a more detailed haptic. Let's click the Generate button. As you can see, it generated an intensity curve from our audio automatically. Now let's increase the resolution and click Generate again. Now you can see we have a more detailed generated curve. Let's reduce it and generate again. Okay, now you can see we have fewer points, which means less detail. Let me reset it to the default value. Next option is Intensity Max. Using this slider, we define the maximum allowed intensity after generating. For example, let's set it to 0.5 and click the Generate button. Now you can see our intensity curve is capped at 0.5. Let's reset it to full intensity. Let's go for generating sharpness from audio, shall we? As you can see, our sharpness curve is currently unrelated to the audio. After hitting the Generate button, you can see it now matches the waveform. We have sharpness baseline here, which defines the minimum sharpness. For example, we set it to 0.3 and hit Generate. Now you can see the lowest values in our sharpness curve are set to 0.3, nothing lower. Next one is sharpness max, which is similar to intensity max. It defines the maximum sharpness. Let's set it to 0.7 and hit generate. Now you can see our maximum sharpness value is 0.7. Let's reset these values to their defaults and generate again. Now that you've learned how to create haptics, it's time to learn how to test them and feel them in your hands. Let's scroll down and click on the Generate QR Code button. You can simply open the Hapthick companion app on your device, available on the App Store and Google Play, scan the QR code, and feel the Hapthick you made. Okay, now let me tell you about the other buttons we have here. First one is the Reset button, which clears everything and creates a new empty Hapthick. Next button is Save As, which allows you to save a new copy of the current Hapthick anywhere you like. For example, let's set the duration to 10 seconds and save it as a new file called My Hapthick Longer. Great. Now you can see our new Hapthick file has been created. Next one is Ahap exporting. Let's expand the Ahap export section. Here we have continuous only and with transient options. Continuous only will export a single continuous Ahap file. With transient will export two files, one for transient, one for continuous. Also under with transient, we have some advanced options. Peak I means the minimum intensity required for a point to be considered a peak. If a sample's intensity is equal to or higher than this value, it's a candidate for transient export. Valley I means the maximum intensity allowed for both neighboring points to qualify them as valleys. This ensures the peak is isolated and not part of a broader wave. Sharp HI means the minimum sharpness required for a point to count as a transient. This ensures only snappy or crisp events are extracted. Now let's export our Ahap right here into the Assets folder. Let's call it My Ahap Export. Okay, great. As you can see, we now have these two files, one continuous and one transient. Now let me show you how to import Ahap files. First, let's open the Hapthick Editor again. Now here we can expand the Create from Ahap Files section. Here we can select our continuous and transient files and click on Import Ahap. Now it asks for a path to save the new Hapthick file. I'm going to save it inside the sample Haptics folder and call it Imported Haptic. Now, as you can see, our curves and duration have been imported successfully. Hope you've learned how to create amazing haptics using our powerful Hapthick editor and bring more feeling to your games. See you in the next one.